Hello, my name is Neil Potter and I have been a coach and a consultant to Agile teams since the year 2000. This video series is about going beyond the basics of Agile software development. In this video, I will discuss what Kanban is and how to implement it with Agile, and when you might decide to eliminate or modify some of the typical Agile practices. Please click below to subscribe for future videos. Many teams implement Agile Scrum and then want to add Kanban to provide more visibility to their work. Agile and Kanban are different approaches and they can work very well together. Let me explain. So firstly, let's discuss the word Kanban and what it means. Kanban means signboard or billboard in Japanese. That is that there's some visibility over the workflow in a factory or an operation. So let's take an example of an automobile company like Toyota. Then if we take their flow, they go from typically supplier, warehouse, fabrication area, assembly, finished good, and then customer. So this is a way to track work from left to right and understand what is in each step, our status, and where there could be problems in that flow. Secondly, it's a way to have a signal from the customer sent back to the beginning of the chain to initiate the beginning of a product. So for example, the customer requests a particular vehicle that is sent to the warehouse as a request. They don't have it, sent to assembly, they don't have that, and it goes all the way back to the supplier. So we don't build products and then hope to sell them. The idea is that we build them in a demand-driven approach, and the demand comes from the signal sent by the customer. So Kanban gives visibility over the beginning and end workflow of that area. So let's take an example of a Kanban board. We have typical steps like backlog, to do, ongoing, and done. They represent the states of the work being done from beginning to end. And then every major piece of work is then listed in the particular column of which state that is actually in, with the goal to get to the done point at the end and have work shipped out and sold to the customer. Now in Kanban, they also establish a work in progress limit. And the work in progress limit tells you where there could be a bottleneck in the flow of the work, where things are building up and not getting addressed correctly to get to the point of done at the end. So big picture, Kanban consists of visualizing a workflow, giving visibility to the tasks and where they are, limiting the work in progress or limiting bottlenecks in the workflow, identifying where they are, and then managing the workflow so you get things to go from the beginning to the end and done. So the column headings represent the states of work in an Agile team. The work is in a backlog state. The work is out of the backlog, maybe assigned to a sprint, ready for work. The work is in the sprint being executed, maybe being coded. The work is ready for testing. It goes to a particular state for testing. It goes to the QA for testing and it's in tests. And then when the bug's been fixed and rework been done, then we go to the done state. So even without Kanban, a regular Agile team would have a task breakdown of their work, typically mimicking the column headings of the diagram. And now we can add Kanban, which is the board or the visibility board, by adding the columns to it and stating where each item actually is. So user story number 5 would be in the backlog. User story number 4, ready for work, maybe assigned to a sprint to be picked up. And then the user story number 2 and 3 are working in progress, and user story number 1 ready for testing. And there will be typical things getting to the endpoint when the work moves from left to right. So the first thing we can do is give visibility to the work by state. And the second thing we do is to actually add a WIP limit. So I've actually added a WIP limit of 2 here. And the idea is that you can have no more than 2 items in a column at any one time. If you have more than 2 items, that would imply that there's a bottleneck occurring at that column. And typically, if you allow for maybe 1 task or 2 tasks per person to be done, then you can figure out the WIP limit for that column. If we had 2 developers working on the team, and each developer should be working on 1 item at one time, then our WIP limit would be 2. If we add more items to that column than 2 items, then that could indicate a bottleneck, and we have to really understand what the bottleneck is caused by. It may be tempting for a team member to kind of give up on user story number 2. It's too ambiguous, they're kind of got stuck or whatever, and then work on user story number 4. And that would indicate the WIP limit has been exceeded. We should really figure out what is going on with user story number 2 and have that addressed before we then work on another item in the backlog. So let's discuss when teams use Agile Scrum and when they use Kanban. Now, in the previous topic area, I mentioned that you could take an Agile Scrum team and you could basically make the data visible by putting on a Kanban board. And therefore, you're using Kanban skills in an Agile kind of world. But there are some teams that actually want to use a Kanban approach without the milestones and ceremonies of Agile. Let's take the first one about using Agile Scrum. If you prefer your work to be broken up into 2, 3, or 4 week chunks, then go with Agile Scrum. If you prefer the work to be discussed in the daily, weekly events of Agile Scrum, like the daily stand-ups, the bi-weekly demos, and the retrospectives, then I will stick with Agile Scrum. They're very useful to coordinate and collaborate a team together. If you prefer the small-scale milestones to avoid distraction, that is, you can stay focused on the work within 2 weeks and not be distracted, then I think Agile Scrum is a good fit. On the other hand, you may have work that comes in and any one item can be completed and deployed. That will be a good time to use Kanban without the 2 week milestones of Agile Scrum. You may have situations like irregular release cycles. Sometimes you release every week, sometimes you release every month or 3 months or 6 months, and therefore you can't fit things into a 2 week regular set of milestones. In that case, you may use Kanban to track status without those milestones being there. Some teams have difficult time breaking up the work into 2 week intervals all the time. The work is either harder, longer, more complicated, and therefore getting it into 2 week milestones on a regular basis is just kind of hassle. And therefore they allow for a week or a month or 2 months or 6 weeks or 5 weeks. In that case, they find the Kanban board useful because you're tracking the work status and not going to force fit it into a particular 2 week interval every time. Sometimes teams do not get distracted by their management or their customers, and they are left alone, or they're able to manage the change request if a change request comes in. And therefore, if they have that discipline and they can focus on the work and the status of the work over a longer period of time, they could use Kanban without the extra milestones of the Agile Scrum ceremonies. So there are times where you can use both and can basically make Kanban a visible version of Agile Scrum. And there are times where the team would use Kanban alone without some of the Agile milestones to it, because they can track the work more uniquely in the Agile picture. So in summary, Kanban is a way to provide visibility to a project's workflow. Regardless of the practices you implement, what is important is that work flows unimpeded from beginning to end. Thanks for watching the video. For more help on these topics or your Agile implementation, please see the links below.